Welcome to the Fast Leader Podcast, where we uncover the leadership life hacks that help you to experience breakout performance faster and rocket to success. And now, here's your host, customer and employee engagement expert and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, Jim Rimbach.
The number one thing that contributes to customer loyalty is emotions. So move onward and upward faster by gaining significantly deeper insight and understanding of your customer journey and personas with emotional intelligence. With your empathy mapping workshop, you'll learn how to evoke and influence the right customer emotions that generate improved customer loyalty and reduce your cost to operate. Get over your emotional hump now by going to empathymapping.com to learn more. Okay, Fast Leader Legion, today I'm excited because I have somebody on the show today who's going to finally help us turn what is perceived as intangible into the tangible. Jennifer Moss was born in Winnipeg, Manitoba, but moved quite a bit when she was young. She lived all around Ontario, including Waterloo and then Ancaster. In university, she went to Ottawa and then London. After university, she lived in Toronto and then San Jose, California, but now she's back in Waterloo, Ontario, along with her husband Jim and 3 kids, Wyatt, Olivia, and Layla. Jennifer was raised by 2 awesome parents. She has a wonderful brother and sister who are almost a decade older than her. Jennifer jokes that she was a bit of a surprise. The family's very close, often gathering for Sunday dinners, and her parents nannied all 3 kids, even living with Jennifer in California so her kids would be exposed to a multi-generational household. Jennifer's parents were hugely impactful in her career. Her dad, Douglas, taught her about paying your dues, being grateful for the work, and that no job is beneath you. Her mom, Sally, gave Jennifer her entrepreneurial spirit. She became one of a small group of nurse practitioners, hand-selected by one of the most recognized medical institutions in the world. Sally would later leave nursing and start up a retail business as she always loved to sew, and it became a passion project that she turned into a $1 million business. Jennifer's career has been a slow and steady wins the race story. She studied communications at university, and today she's the Chief Communications Officer at Plasticity Labs. She started in communications in television, went to film, and then stayed in communications in HR in Silicon Valley. This is where Jennifer believes she experienced the greatest amount of learning and developed a passion for purpose-driven work. It was during this time in her career that she received an award of service from President Obama and attended his inauguration. It taught her that she wanted to make more of a social impact. Ironically, she moved back to Canada and then went on to lead the PR and social media team at an agency, a job she ended up hating because it was the opposite of purpose-driven. But as the sole income earner at the time, Jennifer stuck it out. It would end up being an important tool in her work building empathy in leadership and would teach her how to coach managers what not to do in their roles. Right now, Jennifer feels the most fulfilled and passionate she has ever been in any job, and she plans to keep this one for good. They are on a mission at Plasticity Labs to give 1 billion people the tools to live a happier, healthier, higher performing life. And they are working on that goal right now. Jennifer Moss, are you ready to help us get over the hump?
I am ready.
I'm glad you're here. I love the conversation that we had prior to interviewing. I hope we can actually replicate some of that because people need to hear some of the things that we were talking about. But I've given our Legion a little bit about you, but can you share what your current passion is so that we can get to know you even better?
My current passion is trying to convince global leaders and my government in Canada specifically to invest in a happiness ministry. I want us to have a minister of happiness, just like they have in the United Arab Emirates.
Okay, so now, much like I introduced you and talked about the intangible, what are you talking about? Why in the heck would anybody be interested in having a minister of happiness?
That is a great question. I'm writing a blog right now, and the question I include in that is, why the heck would we want a minister of happiness when we have all these other big problems to solve right now, and they're low-hanging fruit, and we should be dealing with those things. But one of the most important economic shifts that we're seeing right now is a desire to is a desire to change in the workplace. And that's being driven by our biggest workforce and our youngest workforce who are leaving jobs because they're unhappy. They don't have the same stuff that we used to have in my mature generation, where people at their age aren't buying homes anymore. They aren't buying vehicles. They don't have the same golden handcuffs. So they will move out of a job if they are feeling a lack of well-being or happiness. So when you look at the workplace and how important that is to create policies and programming and support for these young people who want to find happiness in their roles and they aren't tied down to you and tied down to a work that has any sort of ownership of them, we need to make commitments to that. Or else we're going to see a lot of big organizations, big corporations, government, any sort of industry start to fail at recruiting and retaining those people.
Well, one of the things that we also talked about that goes a little, okay, so I mean, the whole attracting and retaining is one aspect of a job, of work. But we also had talked a little bit about, what is intangible or perceived as intangible from a performance management perspective. And I mean, you shared a particular story, and that to me, I was like, well, yeah, of course. I mean, I knew from an evidence perspective of these case studies out there, but I think we need to share it.
Well, I love this story, and I included it in the book. It's the story of Ruby receptionists, and they are based out of Oregon. They are they're a part of this new sort of gig economy where you can work from anywhere and you can be a receptionist for any company around the world. Some of these receptionists will manage 10 different companies. And as you know, a receptionist is your first line of defense, is the person that makes your first impressions. And what they wanted to understand was how effective are they in their jobs? And how can they make sure that they assimilate into the culture? Even just how can they improve on their typing skills? And so when the CEO decided to look into gratitude and understand that gratitude actually as an intervention will improve performance, there's lots of really great data and science already out there on that. She tasked her team to spend the next 21 days practicing gratitude and then doing their own hack around tracking the data of their performance. And so what they did was they saw after 21 days of practicing gratitude that they were able to reduce errors in their typing by 20-30%. That alone actually saved them $250,000 a year, but it just improved their client relationships. It changed the dynamic of their workforce, and they are one of the most prosperous companies and rapidly growing companies now in this space. So that's a micro example, I think, of a broader theme around how we can start to look at these intangibles, as you say, interventions around well-being and happiness, this very lofty concept. But look at how, if we invest in well-being, if we invest in happiness, how it translates into higher performance across every job, every industry, every individual.
Well, that might be a micro case, but I mean, it has macro impacts.
Absolutely. Yes.
I mean, when you start taking, okay, so now I have, especially for them as a company, I have many, receptionists, or think about an organization as I have a lot of, knowledge workers, and I have a lot of contact center, agents. You start multiplying these things. It also isn't just a one-time benefit. Talking about the analytics and the impact is that it's year over year recurring.
Absolutely. We see this across the board. I mean, we work in education, we work in public health. We're able to map patient healing and patient care to happier doctors and nurses, to better, more well staff. It actually reduces the amount of time a patient will be on the drugs after they leave their pain medications after they leave the hospital. We are looking, for example, in education. We've been measuring for so long this sort of antiquated metric of engagement. But when you look at, when you actually look at purpose-driven jobs like teachers and doctors, engagement's high. We show up in our jobs. We are there because we care. And yet what happens is we're not catching things like compassion fatigue, empathy fatigue, depletion, stress, anxiety, and that's killing our workforce. That's killing people, individuals, like literally actually hurting them and causing death. So we have to understand that if we can improve those measures by better nuanced, better understanding through data gathering, that we might be able to solve some of these problems by intervening much earlier than we are right now.
And you bring up a really interesting point about some of the metrics that we're leveraging. And, prior to us actually, recording, is that I talked about one of the things that I like to say is that when people come to me or they make some type of comment, about particular metrics and or talk about certain performance, they're like, well, that's an intangible. And for me, I always have to come back and say, the reason it's an intangible is because you don't know how to measure it.
Right. Exactly. Like I mentioned with that last case study, I mean, you can figure out any way to measure anything, really. We have the capacity to look at what we care about. What are our goals? For some, a nonprofit, it might be, getting more donors for staff inside of an education environment. It might be better academic outcomes for students. And we have ways to measure this. And we can look at how well-being and healthiness and happiness contribute to those goals. It's simpler than we think. We tend to try to, as humans, overcomplicate the solutions, and yet we can easily fix these issues. Even just going back to kind of grandma's rules around, kindness and the golden rule, and all these things that we're supposed to be working on as just part of who we are. But as we've shifted away from some of these sort of these parts of our life that encourage that way of behaving, it's getting sort of further and further away from us behaving that way. And if we bring those in, and then we can show that it actually increases people's performance and tie it to the economic benefits, because we are in a capitalist society, we can prove that, then those grandma rules kind of get to come back in a way that's supported by corporate and by government and all those other people that care about the bottom line.
Okay, so as you were talking, I started thinking about some of the underlying metrics associated with some of these performance metrics, because when you start, thinking about the ones that are oftentimes, referred to as, KPIs, key performance indicators, getting all of that, and what an organization is actually tracking, at maybe a department level or a team level. Of course, it goes all the way up into the, to the corporate levels. If you start getting the shareholder wealth and value, if you're publicly traded, there's all kinds of different metrics. But there's underlying metrics that often, are the ones that you should be using from your management perspective, because they're going to drive, many of those numbers that are often being tracked at a higher level. So if you start thinking about some of those, micro types of or underlying metrics, what are some of the ones that you see people now looking at that they didn't look at before?
Well, we get pretty deep into traits like their psych cap, and as part of positive psychology and psychological capital, and they're called hero traits, but their hope, efficacy, resilience, optimism, gratitude, empathy, mindfulness, predicted job satisfaction is important, because it actually shows, do you feel like you're going to come out of the hole? Compression workloads, that's a problem. When you look at accountants, they have these seasons that are really tough, but they know that they're going to get to the light at the end of the tunnel. So predicted job satisfaction, we combine all that with NPS, net promoter scores, and some of those other scores, and bundle it all together and understand what are the, culture drivers. And that's like hygiene, trust, communication, this kind of table stakes inside of organizations. When you meld all that together and look at things like hope, for example, when we see the hygiene of a company, their trust and communication dive, hope is the first thing to fall off. But if you don't have hope, what happens is you start to see that you might be able to affect change. But if you don't believe in the collective change, opportunity for change, that reduces your hope or your feeling of efficacy. So all of these things tied together into this, in creating really small data, that is what helps us to analyze if you are in a good place. Plus, it's also time of measurement. So we look at things every 90 days, and then we actually look at day-to-day measurement of mood. So you can be like, we sometimes refer it as that volatility factor, like in the stock market, when people bump in and out of their volatility range. Inside of organizations, they have this same thing. We might ask someone on an engagement survey on the day that they just, and the day that they didn't sleep the night before, and we ask them to report on their engagement survey, they're going to give you miserable results. But if we ask people every 90 days, sort of getting checkpoints with them, we can see how the ebb and flow of everyday life and the nuances of experiences inside of the workplace factor in to that volatility. One of the things that is important to note is we also really want to focus on qualitative feedback. Sometimes when I go into a team of 40 and there's a manager, and all I keep hearing about is how bad the coffee sucks inside of that one, inside of their break room. Sometimes all it is just saying, I hear you. You believe that the coffee sucks and the microwave doesn't work, so I'm going to go and fix that. You're amazed at how much happiness improves inside of these teams. We're not doing a good job of understanding that it's about individual experiences, the whole being that comes to work, and not these giant programmatic sweeping changes that actually feel like they fall on deaf ears.
I think you bring up some really good points. And so for me, going from that, putting my analytics hat on, you're continually trying to track and understand the independent variables and how they're driving the dependent variable, which is an MPS or whatever it may be that you're looking and trying to drive. So I would dare to say an organization also has to give you, as well as themselves, the opportunity to do some testing to find out what independent variables are actually going to impact what they're trying to drive.
That is an excellent point. What we found is that every single organization has a different culture than another. We work with, Lululemon and then banks. I mean, and startups are very different than these giant global organizations. Teachers and then doctors. I mean, these are all very different groups of people. And then when you also look between inside those organizations, what's the difference between a developer and programmer or an IT engineer versus a marketing, a sales person? I mean, it's so nuanced that we have to understand what is the sort of the secret sauce of that organization that drives and motivates those people inside that organization. Blend that with what the stakeholders and the shareholders and the CEO wants to drive towards. And then also understand that if we can put, that sort of leadership thinking mixed in with how people are actually driven, and then figure out where the gaps are, where it's not meeting those people, tie all that together in a bow and be able to say, okay, we can't fix everything. Rome isn't built in a day, but why don't we target one thing that we see you're doing well, and then also combat one thing that is going wrong. And seeing that there's nuances inside of the cultures, that corporations themselves have their own special culture. Lulu is a great example in that they hire a lot of athletes because athletes are very drawn to their brand. And so you've got a certain personality trait there in that they are already doing the work around their own psychological fitness. They're doing yoga, they're doing meditation, they are attracted to the brand. And so you've got really high performing people that are heading, towards them. And so their culture has this capacity to attract really exciting, young, high performing people. Whereas you might not see that in an industry that isn't as alluring or as exciting. So there's different problems there and different issues that you have to solve.
So, I think I also want to go back. There's something that you had mentioned that we might need to clarify a little bit, because unless you're in it, you may not interpret it properly. And you said hygiene, the organizational hygiene. Now, we're not talking about brushing their teeth and bathing themselves. What are we really talking about?
So I use hygiene actually quite a bit. Sean Aker, who wrote the foreword for my book, he's written a couple other books. He's just a fantastic writer, researcher. He came up with the concept of happiness hygiene. And it's this idea of sort of that plasticity piece, practicing every day the ritual of improving your own health. Well, organizations have a hygiene too. And you're right, it isn't brushing your teeth, but it is just the table stakes stuff where you come to work and you expect a certain level of, commensurate pay. You expect to have a desk. You expect to have certain things laid out for you. And we consider these culture drivers as the hygiene of the organization that just needs to be strong, or else you won't have a high-performing, happy, healthy company. And that's the trust and the communication piece. It's that sort of accountability space, and where that really does fall through, actually. And unfortunately, in a lot of organizations, that trust and communication piece is one of the biggest unhappiness or happiness detractors inside of organizations, because they can't get that right. And part of that is just scale. Part of that is that you're growing too fast. Part of that is that we all have different ways that we want to communicate. And just in general, we have a fairly disengaged global workforce. So there's people there that are actually pulling those happy people away from being happy.
So as you're saying that, I started thinking about too much like the independent variables that are going to drive, the performance that you want. The hygiene is going to be different too. For example, especially when you start talking about, and it isn't even a generational thing anymore, but, you're asking me to do a particular job and you're not giving me the tools. You want me to do something technical and I'm working off an IBM AS400 green screen. Hello,
right.
you can't put me, that's not good hygiene.
That is a great example. Again, I'm going to steal this from you. You've had so many today, which is great, but that is exactly it. You can't ask someone to meet certain expectations if you aren't going to give them the tools to meet them. And we need to get better at that. We need to understand that it's frustrating when you have technology is a great example, because when it's not working right for people, it is extremely frustrating. And you start to feel like you aren't mastering your skills. And mastery, actually, as it relates to happiness, when you look at PERMA and positive psychology, when you look at the key traits to being happy, mastery is a very important part of that. So, and when you look at PERMA, which is purpose, engagement, relationships, meaning, and accomplishment, those, you look at what that means. If you don't have the tools to be effective, you are losing basically these 5 pillars of what make you happy in your life and work. So organizations have to get really clear on how to make people feel more effective by providing them the tools.
I think you bring up a great point. I was just talking to a friend of mine who's been with the same organization for over 20 years, and he just started a brand new role, which is very different from what he was used to doing. And he said, he goes, I just feel so overwhelmed. He goes, I have so many things I need to learn. And so for me, as I heard, because of what I, being certified in emotional intelligence and all the work that I'm doing and meeting wonderful people like you who just, spread my eyes even more wide open, is that what he was talking about was that whole mastery thing. He has an insecurity now, feels like he's not competent, feels like he's starting all over again. And there's a lot of insecurities associated with that. And as an organization, you need to be aware of that and address that so that somebody can be more forgiving of self more than anything.
It's so true. And what happens is this breakdown in succession planning. If someone comes into the role, they don't do a very good job of succession planning, or leadership just fits someone into a role and then says, kind of, you figure it out. And that's one of the worst things that we can do for high performing people, because they are hardest on themselves and they have high expectations of how quickly they can acclimate. But if we don't have programs that get people feeling like they're up to the task fast enough, then you drive down your resiliency, you drive down your hope, you don't feel effective, and then you start to disengage. And so succession planning is one of the most important ways that we can support these high performing people to move into new roles.
Okay, now I do want to share, because we're going to have to move on, but I mean, there were some really important things to me that would help, a lot of folks, keep top of mind. And I'm just going to say, you guys got to get the book, who's listening, because you talked about an H3 a model, which is, focusing on the positive and helping with change. And then you also talked about a persist model. And we're not going to have time to go over those. Maybe we'll have to get you back. But hey, guys, you need to get the book, Unlocking Happiness at Work, How a Data-Driven Happiness Strategy Fuels Purpose, Passion, and Performance. And that's where I am with that right now. But because, as you and I are both very, very passionate about all of this, and one of the things that we focused in on the show are quotes, to help us, give them some extra energy and hopefully be more happy. Is there a quote or two that you like that you can share?
Yeah, I have lots. But one I love is you can have anything, but not everything. And for me, that's about prioritization and understanding you have to be here, be in the moment right now, and understand that life is a bit of triage and priority setting. And, I am always asked as a woman who has kids, on stage, like, how do you do it? And the answer is really, I don't really do it. I figure it out as I go, but I'm okay with that, because as much as I want to do so many different things, I have to understand what is my priority every single day, and get other people to not burn out, not to deplete. I was just in Dubai, and Arianna Huffington was talking about how we glamorize the leaders that burn themselves out. And that is not what we should be doing. We should not be glamorizing burnout. We should be celebrating people who can prioritize. So you can have anything, not everything is one of the biggest, it's kind of my motto, and I follow it as much as possible.
Well, I think that's a really good one. It kind of, helps you hopefully stay in the right direction and move that direction faster. But when I start thinking about all that, and even myself, trying to do certain things and staying up late and, getting up early and all that, I'm like, I'm burning myself out too many times. But there's a lot of humps that you have to get over in order to kind of figure out the best path that's for you. So for me, sometimes I try cycling through, and I don't mean like bicycling, I mean cycling through different periods by which, okay, I know I'm going to be up late and then I need to go to bed early. It drives my wife nuts, who's the accountant. She's like, how could, you were just up till 2:00 last night. Now you want to go to bed at 10. I'm like, I have the opportunity to do it. So I'm doing
so
it.
True.
But can you actually share a story about a time when you've had to get over the hump so we can learn?
Oh, gosh, I have a million of them. I am a founder of a startup, and we had 2 young kids, and we came here. We're considered mature founders, right? We didn't come straight out of university and start this tech company, but we came into running Plasticity out of our personal, passion sort of story. And it started actually when my husband became almost fatally ill. He was a professional lacrosse player and had come off of winning the World Cup and finally beat the US, sorry to say, after 28 years of losing. Granted, it was their time. But he used gratitude in the hospital to recover, and they didn't think he was going to walk again. And after 6 weeks, we realized that that our narrative, our mood, all of those things impacted our healing, and it changed our lives. We moved back from California to Canada and started this passion project essentially. And it took a lot of our life savings, our life, our commitment, and there were a lot of hurdles along the way where we thought we weren't going to do this. And then just as we decided to turn down a job for me to work in a very cushy, easy comms job, we found out we were pregnant with our third. And so when you talk about humps and big humps, we knew that it would have to be triage. I took the baby in at 2 weeks old into some of our meetings with our investors. I mean, it was definitely where passion moved us through those goals. But now I look back and it's been 6 years, 8 years since Jim got sick, and I wouldn't change anything. I mean, it's been a driver of my happiness and a reminder of how you can have anything, not everything, every single day. So I think you're right in that you can choose to go to bed at 10 or 2, whatever the moment deals you. But it's our flexibility and our resilience that's going to make us have the most successful lives.
Without a doubt. And thanks for sharing that, because I think, for me, hearing you tell that story, and I also had the opportunity to watch it on video when you told it, and had a chance to have a little bit more detail associated with it. I mean, it was pretty impactful. Kind of tugs on you in a lot of ways. So I can only imagine that when you reflect upon that time, could you ever have foreseen that you would now look back on that in a positive way?
No. The short answer, it wasn't all at once. It wasn't like we just had some sort of gratitude epiphany and all of those stresses went away. There was lots of times where I felt very sorry for myself and sad, and it didn't just, it wasn't a linear path to happiness. There were some low moments. I know a year and a half or 2 later when we really understood that Jim was never going to go back to play, that there was some moments there where, we thought there would be a recovery or a comeback, and that didn't happen. And so you go down again. And, but what we learned was that we have the capacity to rebuild. And so the more we suffered losses or the more pain we would go through, or the more we were forced to rebound, that really did teach us that we can keep dealing with things. And so now it's just a faster process of rebounding. We have higher resiliency. We're more fluent in gratitude. So when we are being ironic as a happiness, co-founders of a happiness company, and we aren't following our rules, we get quickly back to them because we know that it works. But we still have, I wrote this article for HBR called Happiness Isn't the Absence of Negative Emotions. And it really is about us having emo diversity, not feeling guilty for feeling sad, being okay to be stressed, but working on your psychological fitness so that when you deal with trauma, that you can come out of it in a healthier, higher performing way and not get sort of stuck there. And so that's been the big learning.
I mean, I'm glad that you shared that, because for me, when I started thinking about it, it's like, okay, Well, embrace it. Be sad, be distraught, embrace it. But you need to learn also when to let it go.
That is the big learning that I had, because at first, again, I was still in this sort of first world problem place. We had all the stuff, we had all the things. We're living in California, a great house, great jobs, but we weren't actually very happy. And so it took me some time through that process to figure out what does actually make me happy. And it wasn't the stuff, it wasn't the is quoted on paper as being the definition of the successful life. There were other things that made me happy. And so that learning and that evolving slowly got me to this place. And it makes me not live in that sort of feeling sorry for myself space as much. Granted, I still have bonbon days and, the times where I just want to eat chocolate and have a glass of wine and feel bad for myself. That's pretty normal. But it's few and far between versus when I had everything and I felt like that all the time. So yeah, it's been quite a journey.
Okay. So you talk about, the council, the global council, you have the practice, you have the book. So you got a lot of things going on, but if you had one goal, just one, what would it be?
One goal. Oh gosh, there's it's funny when I talk about the have it, everything not or anything, not everything. I'm constantly shiny object. I have a real problem with feeling like I'm missing out. I think I do have a goal of writing a children's book. I spend quite a bit of time working with youth and students. We measure the happiness and intervene as young as kindergartners. We're in testing right now with little JKs, and we're asking them what makes them happy and do they know, what empathy means. And we're measuring in this goal to follow them actually over the next 20 years in this longitudinal study to see how interventions at 3 years old impacts the rest of their life. So that's pretty exciting. But I think, my next steps are really focusing in on education and spending more time with little kids and writing children's books around these hero traits and focusing in on that goal. When I was 8, I put in a time capsule that I was going to win the Newbery Award for Literature for children's books. So I've written the adult book. I feel like now it's my time to write the children's book.
And the Fast Leader Legion wishes you the very best. Now, before we move on, let's get a quick word from our sponsor. Call Center Coach develops and unites the next generation of call center leaders. Through our e-learning and community, individuals gain knowledge and skills in the 6 core competencies that is the blueprint that develops high-performing call center leaders. Successful supervisors do not just happen. So go to callcentercoach.com to learn more about enrollment and download your copy of the Supervisor Success Path ebook now. All right, here we go, Fast Leader Legion. It's time for the Hump Day Hoedown. Okay, Jennifer, the Hump Day Hoedown is the part of our show where you give us good insights fast. So I'm going to ask you several questions, and your job is to give us robust yet rapid responses that are going to help us move onward and upward faster. Jennifer Moss, are you ready to hoedown?
I am ready to hoedown.
All right. So what do you think is holding you back from being an even better leader today?
I think that I get distracted by all the things I want to do. So I have to get better at that.
What is the best leadership advice you have ever received?
To be able to practice the golden rule, which is do unto others as they would have you treat them, not do unto others as you would want to treat them.
What is one of your secrets that you believe contributes to your success?
I have intuition. I have pretty good gut, and I follow it. Anytime I don't, I get into big trouble.
What do you feel is one of your best tools that helps you lead in business or life?
I absolutely rely on my Outlook calendar if we're talking about what is required. I have a very busy schedule, and I've learned to rely on beeps and signals and Siri and all those people that help me to be successful.
And what would be one book that you'd recommend to our listeners? And it could be from any genre. Of course, we're going to put a link to Unlocking Happiness at Work on your show notes page as well.
I loved Malcolm Gladwell's Blink. I was just in Dubai listening to him speak, and he references it, but it's this idea of if we go with our gut, we actually make better decisions every time because our bodies are like human lie detectors. So I love his books. Okay,
Fast Leader Legion, you can find links to that and other bonus information from today's show by going to fastleader.net/Jennifer Moss. Okay, Jennifer, this is my last Hump Day Hoedown question. Imagine you were given the opportunity to go back to the age of 25 And you've been given the opportunity to take the knowledge and skills that you have now back with you, but you can't take everything back. You can only choose one. So what skill or piece of knowledge would you take back with you, and why?
Patience, that everything is going to work out just fine. Because I had a quarter century crisis like most young people do at 25, and they feel like they have to figure it all out by 25 years old. And what you realize is that you actually know nothing until you actually, go through the experiences of life. And then you get really chilled out. And I love being 40. I love it. I feel like I've got all this, this relaxed way of thinking about the world. And I wish I had that at 25.
Jennifer, it was an honor to spend time with you today. Can you please share with the Fast Leader Legion how they can connect with you?
Absolutely. I'm active on Twitter, Jen Lee Moss, LEIGHMOSS. I'm on Instagram and LinkedIn on those same same URLs, and then also plasticitylabs.com.
Jennifer Moss, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom. The Fast Leader Legion honors you and thanks you for helping us get over the hump. Thank you for joining me on the Fast Leader Show today. For recaps, links from every show, special offers, and access to download and subscribe, if you haven't already, head on over to fastleader.net so we can help you move onward and upward faster.